The more you explain, the weaker you seem. The more you react, the more power you give away. And the harder you try to prove yourself, the more obvious it becomes that someone got under your skin. Let's face it, in a world addicted to drama and noise, silence is no longer passivity. It's strategy. When your words are twisted, when truth becomes ammunition, when your reaction becomes their entertainment, this is no longer a conversation. It's a psychological game. And the louder you get, the more you've already lost. But here's the twist. You don't need to fight back. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to explain yourself to be right. You only need two things: silence and time. Because when you stop, the universe starts. When you stay quiet, the truth begins its slow, unstoppable work. Truth has a gravitational pull. It always returns to where it belongs. In this video, I'll reveal 7 powerful situations where a wise, stoic man chooses absolute silence, not out of fear, but out of strength, to protect his energy, to preserve his dignity, to let the weight of their own actions crush them without lifting a single finger. Because silence isn't the absence of words. It's the presence of control. Stay until the final moment, because the last lesson will forever change how you see silence. 1. When you're lied about, few things feel more unjust than being lied about. The instinct is immediate. You want to defend yourself, correct the narrative, prove who you really are. But here's the hard truth. The more you explain, the guiltier you look. The more you chase clarity, the more chaos they create. Why? Because people who spread lies aren't searching for truth. They're hunting for a reaction. They want to shake your calm. They want you to flinch. They want you to perform your innocence so they can twist it into proof of guilt. And here's the trap. If you react, you've already lost. This is where Stoicism draws the line. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it's not true, don't say it. If it's not right, don't do it." And that's all you need. You don't plead, you don't explain. You live by your integrity, not by their version of your story. Because truth has something lies will never have: endurance. Lies spread like wildfire, but burn out fast. Truth takes longer, but it doesn't need defending. It reveals itself with time. Let me tell you a story. There was a man. Let's call him Nathan. He was falsely accused at work. Rumors spread. People distanced themselves. His first instinct? Prove his innocence. But instead, he chose silence. He stayed calm, focused. Let his work speak louder than his words. Weeks later, the truth surfaced. The accuser was exposed for manipulation. And Nathan? Because he never fought back, he never lost face. He rose above the noise, and his dignity stayed untouched. That's stoic strength. So how do you respond when someone lies about you? First, trust the long game. Falsehoods are loud but short-lived. Truth is quiet but lasting. Second, anchor yourself in your values. When you know who you are, the noise outside can't touch you. Third, let karma speak. People who live by lies eventually trap themselves. Silence is not surrender, it's self-respect. You're not hiding, you're rising above the noise. 2. When you're betrayed. Betrayal doesn't just hurt, it changes you. It shakes the ground beneath your feet, and it always comes from those you trusted. Friends, partners, family. The first impulse? Confront them. Ask why. Demand closure. But here's the brutal reality. People who betray you have already justified it in their mind. They don't see what they've done, or worse, they do, and simply don't care. And the more you chase closure, the more you reopen your own wound. Because when someone betrays you, what they truly want is your energy, your reaction, your pain. So what happens when you give them nothing? No rage, no revenge, no explanation, just silence. That's when they realize they didn't just lose access to your words, they lost access to your soul. Seneca once wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." Betrayal is friction. It stings, but it clarifies. It separates what's real from what's temporary. It forces you to see one hard truth: not everyone you love is meant to stay. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman, let's call her Clara. She had a best friend for over a decade. They shared everything: dreams, secrets, victories. But one day, Clara discovered this friend had betrayed her, exposed her secrets, undermined her success. For what? Jealousy, ego. At first, Clara wanted confrontation. She wanted her to feel the same pain. But instead, Clara chose silence. No fight, no drama, just a quiet exit. And do you know what happened? The friend waited for the blow-up. She expected chaos, but all she got was absence. And that silence haunted her. Because silence has weight. It echoes louder than any argument ever could. So when betrayal finds you, and it will, remember this. First, accept who they really are. Don't cling to who you thought they were. Second, don't waste breath on someone who already erased your worth in their mind. Third, walk away without explanation. Silence forces reflection. And reflection is what betrayers avoid most. At the end of the day, you're not the one who lost. They lost someone loyal, rare and real. Let them live with that, not through punishment, but through your absence. 3. When you're insulted, insults are cheap. That's why the weak use them. Sarcasm, passive aggression, verbal jabs, they're not speaking truth. They're fishing for your reaction. Because your reaction is their validation. The moment you snap back, raise your voice, or defend yourself, you've handed them exactly what they wanted: control. Here's what most people miss. You don't need to win the argument. You just need to not enter it. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." When someone insults you, they're inviting you into the mud. But a Stoic doesn't live in the mud. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't fire back. He just observes, calm, still, unbothered. Let me tell you a story. There was a man, let's call him Leon. He had just earned a well-deserved promotion. At the company event, a jealous coworker smirked and said loudly, "Wow, I guess they're giving promotions to just anyone now." Everyone turned to Leon, waiting for a reaction. But he didn't argue. He didn't defend. He simply smiled, looked the man in the eye, and said nothing. And in that moment, Leon didn't just win the room, he won the war. Because silence strips power, and nothing frustrates an insulter more than being ignored. So how do you handle insults? First, recognize what they're fishing for. They don't want truth, they want to disrupt your peace. Second, let your stillness speak. When your face doesn't flinch, it sends a louder message. You don't control me. Third, hold your frame. Confidence doesn't argue. Self-respect doesn't explain. At the end of the day, the most devastating answer to an insult is indifference. 4. When someone plays the victim, some people don't want resolution. They want attention. They don't want solutions. They want to control the narrative. So they play the victim. They rewrite the story. They erase their own role. They twist facts. They shed tears. And suddenly, you become the villain. And the more you try to explain, the worse it gets. Because to everyone else, it looks like you're attacking someone who's already hurting. This isn't conflict. It's performance. And you've just been cast as the enemy. Stoic wisdom warns us of this trap. Epictetus said, "To complain is always non-productive and never appropriate." Victim players don't complain for solutions. They complain for sympathy. And if you defend yourself, you validate their act. The only winning move? Silence. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman, let's call her Hannah. She had a coworker who constantly twisted reality. Whenever held accountable, she cried, deflected, shifted blame. Hannah tried to stay logical. She brought proof. She stayed calm. She explained the facts. And it backfired. Why? Because Hannah was speaking facts, while the other woman was playing emotions. And in the court of public opinion, emotion beats reason. So Hannah stopped. No more defense, no more counterpoints. Just quiet, stoic detachment. And over time, the truth surfaced. People saw the pattern. They realized this person always had a sob story, always a new enemy, always a new injustice. And just like that, the act collapsed. So how do you handle a manipulative victim? First, don't defend yourself. They're not listening. They're acting. Second, stay emotionally detached. Observe, don't absorb. Let them drown in the chaos they created. Third, trust patterns. People might believe them once, maybe twice, but repetition exposes the mask. At the end of the day, you don't owe clarity to someone who profits from confusion. Let them play their role. Let them gather their audience. Let them run their script. Because sooner or later, the show ends in silence. That's how you bring down the curtain. 5. When someone provokes you, and some people don't seek peace, they seek control. They poke. They produced. They say things designed to sting, not because they're brave, but because it's the only way they feel powerful. The moment you flinch, they win. The moment you argue, they feed. The moment you let your emotions rise, they know they've got you. Here's the truth most people miss. Their goal isn't conflict. Their goal is control. They want to break your frame. They want to make you act out of their emotions. If they can trigger you, they become the puppeteer, pulling strings behind a fake smile. But here's where Stoicism becomes your shield. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's self-mastery. You can't stop people from provoking you, but you can deny them the one thing they crave most, your reaction. Let me tell you a story. There was a man, let's call him Victor. He had a coworker who thrived on chaos. Every meeting, every conversation, there was a sarcastic jab, always framed just vague enough to avoid consequences. At first, Victor would defend himself. He'd argue, explain, justify, and every time, he left the room more exhausted than before. Until one day, he made a shift. The next time that coworker tried to provoke him, Victor just looked at him, smiled faintly, gave a calm nod, and said nothing. No eye rolls, no sighs, no tension, just detachment. And the result? The coworker flinched. Because when you're used to playing with fire, you don't know what to do when the match doesn't light. Eventually, he gave up. Because without fuel, even the most toxic flame dies out. So how do you handle provocation? First, recognize the pattern. Repetition reveals motive. If someone constantly stirs conflict, it's not personal, it's strategic. Second, hold your frame. Don't let emotional bait pull you out of alignment. You control your breath, your tone, your presence. Third, let your calm be your power. The more unshakable you are, the more powerless they feel. At the end of the day, not everything that provokes you deserves your energy. And not every opponent is worth a response. The strongest man in the room isn't the loudest. It's the one everyone tries to provoke, and no one can move. Because his silence isn't empty, it's armor. 6. When you're taken for granted, the greatest insult isn't what they say to you. It's what they no longer notice. You show up, you give, you care, you make the calls, you send the messages, you offer your presence, and in return, silence, indifference, disinterest. There's no dramatic betrayal, just the slow erosion of your value in their eyes. Here's the bitter truth. The more you try to prove your worth, the less they see it. Because people don't value what's always available. They value what they're afraid to lose. And when you're constantly present, constantly reaching out, you don't become indispensable. You become invisible. This is where Stoicism hands your power back. Seneca once said, "Time discovers truth." And sometimes the truth they need to discover is your absence. Let me tell you a story. There was a man, let's call him Ethan. He was the consistent one, the friend who always checked in, the colleague who remembered every birthday, the partner who never forgot to ask, "How was your day?" But slowly, he noticed something. No one asked about his day. No one reached out, unless he did first. So one day he stopped. No arguments, no speeches, no announcements, just silence. And the result? The ones who truly cared reached out. The ones who didn't, they disappeared. And that was his answer. So what do you do when your worth is ignored? First, stop chasing. If they can't see your value while you're present, let them feel it when you're gone. Second, say nothing. Silence forces awareness. When your presence is missing, your value becomes undeniable. Third, observe who makes the effort. The people who matter won't need a reminder. They'll notice the shift, and they'll move toward you, not away. At the end of the day, you don't prove your worth with effort. You prove it with distance. Because those who deserve your energy will feel the silence. And those who don't, they were never meant to have it. Let your absence speak. Let it echo in the space they once took for granted. And never beg to be seen by those who've already closed their eyes. 7. When they regret losing you. Regret is loud. But silence? Silence is louder. There comes a moment, after they've taken you for granted, after they've ignored your value, after they assumed you'd always be there, when they realize you're gone. And suddenly the silence they once overlooked becomes deafening. They start remembering the way you listened, the way you showed up, the way you gave more than you received. And it hits them. They didn't just lose a person, they lost a presence, a constant. But by then, it's too late. Here's what you need to understand. If someone only starts to value you after you leave, they never truly valued you when it counted. And the worst thing you can do is go back, just because they finally noticed. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And self-mastery means this. You don't return to places that broke you. You don't lower your standards to comfort someone else's guilt. You don't explain your silence. You let it speak for you. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman. Let's call her Isabella. She gave everything to her relationship. Time, love, energy. Her partner, he got comfortable, took her for granted, assumed her presence was permanent. Until one day, she left. No argument, no breakdown, no tears, just a quiet exit. At first, he brushed it off. Then came the weeks, the months, the unanswered calls, the echo of a presence he didn't realize he needed, until it was no longer his. He begged, he apologized, he promised change. But Isabella, she had already healed, in silence. And that silence became her freedom. So what do you do when someone regrets losing you? First, don't give them an easy way back. If your value was invisible then, your absence needs to stay visible now. Second, resist the urge to explain. Let them feel the full weight of their actions, without cushioning it with closure. Third, stand firm in your silence, not out of spite, but out of respect for yourself. At the end of the day, they had access to you. They wasted it. Now let them sit with that truth, alone. Because your silence, that's not punishment, that's wisdom. It says, you don't get to walk in and out of my life and still expect the door to stay open. Let them regret, let them remember, but don't let them return. You don't owe them a second chance. You owe yourself peace. The final lesson, you don't need to yell to be heard. You don't need to fight to win. And you don't need to speak to make a statement. In a world addicted to noise, silence is radical. It's not weakness. It's not surrender. It's the language of those who no longer need validation. Because when you fall silent, you take back your power. You step out of the trap. You let time, truth, and karma finish the sentence you chose not to write. A stoic man doesn't chase approval. He doesn't beg for closure. He doesn't collapse under noise. He simply steps back and lets the universe do what it does best, restore balance. So the next time someone lies, betrays, insults, provokes, or regrets. Don't respond. Don't explain. Don't perform. Just watch and wait. Because karma doesn't need your help. It just needs your silence. If this message struck something deep inside you, if you found truth hidden between these lines, then don't just click away. Subscribe to Stoic Sage Academy, where strength is quiet, wisdom is sharp, and every word is built to last. And if you know someone who needs this message, share it. Or let your own silence echo it forward.